much for joining us. This is a very timely conversation given we are 6 days away from the age limit on social media coming into force in Australia, although Meta has moved today, so getting ahead of the deadline. Look, there's a lot I want to get through here, and we will have time for some questions from the floor as well, but perhaps we should start by identifying the nature of the problem that we're talking about here and the approach to tackling it. Julie, to you first, is the evidence any clearer now? Is it building this body of evidence to suggest that social media is doing more harm than good to children?
Absolutely, and some of our own research that was released in June of this year with young people and their parents found that actually 96% of 10 to 15-year-olds already have a social media account. 70% of them have experienced harm online. 1 in 7 had experienced grooming or sexual exploitation by either an adult or a teenager at least 4 or 5 years older. And I guess the controversy that came in June when I gave my independent safety advice to the incoming minister was that the vast majority of children, 40%, experience that harm on YouTube.
Is it black and white? I mean, it sounds from those statistics that it is black and white. Or do you see there's some benefit for some children being on social
absolutely.
media?
I think we have to be balanced and nuanced in this discussion. I spent 22 years in the technology sector and very much believed in the power of technology to really transform society. I joined Twitter in 2014, and Fifi and I were talking about opening up Twitter's office in Indonesia. It was the 4th largest market for Twitter back then, organically behind the US, UK, and Japan. So I've always believed in it, but now we've just really seen this corrosive effect. And what I want to make sure that I also get across is that we're not just pioneers in terms of this legislation, which does a very specific thing. It's an age restriction bill around social media. We were the first online safety regulator in the world. We've been established for 10 years, and we're the only one for about 7 years. So we have been pioneering, and we have a whole range of tools. Obviously, I'm very focused pending the High Court challenge of implementing this legislation, but we've had some really important actions around roadblocks, around nudifying apps, and other things, and I want to talk about what we're doing around AI chatbots and companions.
Yeah, we'll come back to that because that's really interesting in terms of the next steps here. But just coming back to the question, Fifi, about the nature of the problem, is what you're seeing in Indonesia similar when it comes to the harm social media is causing?
Yes, David, but from a different social culture background for Indonesian. I just want to share that on November, there is a bomb developed by, happening in the high school in Jakarta. So 50 children were injured, nothing more serious, but it really created the conversation that we need a Child Safety Online Act. And that is one of the momentum that we look with deep regret that maybe we should have done it sooner. Of course, it's a multiple factor cause when it comes to children, because the child, the perpetrator, is said to be bullied, and he wants to avenge the friends during that Friday prayer. But we think that it should have been done earlier, but thank God, this year on March 28, our president signed the government regulation number 17/2025, and this makes sure that we have a law, enforceable, a comprehensive law to make sure that we create a safety online for children.
So just explain to us what that means in practice. Indonesia is not doing the age limit at 16 in the way that Australia is, but what are you doing?
It's different because it's almost the same. We also regulate social media, but we also regulate online games and also web-based platforms. So we want to make sure that children are not restricted from accessing the internet, but with parental guidance. So, for instance, the platform has this assessment. If the platform has a feature of being able, the strangers can talk to our children, that includes to the high risk. But if the online game doesn't have that feature, it's included in the low risk. Mm-hmm. So it has a different approach than Australia, but we do appreciate from Australia because it is very important for the social media access for 16 years. So in Indonesia, if you are 16 years above, then you can have an account for social media, but not when you're 16, if the platform is considered high risk.
So what are some of those platforms that are high risk in that category?
That is still being assessed, because this is an ongoing process.
But TikTok, I mean, I'm talking about the most popular ones, TikTok, Instagram, would they fall into that category of high risk?
If they are able to have if they allow feature of strangers being able to communicate with our children, so I say yes.
They do? Mm-hmm. Okay, but when will this take effect?
1 year from now, not 1 year from now, 2026. 2026, but it's still an ongoing process because the ministerial regulation is still being developed.
Okay, and that will determine the platforms?
Yes.
And that means anyone under 16 cannot have an account on those platforms?
Yes, David.
Okay, explain to us the Australian perspective, approach, because I think there is still some confusion about how it's going to work. Just give us a snapshot of what we're actually talking about here.
Well, as we know, that it really grew as a populist movement from the States, from South Australia, and then New South Wales, and then it was taken on board, and it was very bipartisan. It was passed relatively quickly. So what the aim of the legislation is to prevent all social media platforms, the onus is on them, not parents or children, to restrict any under 16s from having or holding a social media account. So what they used in the legislation, and interestingly, what is something called the sole and significant purpose test. So if the sole or significant purpose is deemed to be online social interaction, it can be captured as an age-restricted social media platform. What I asked for was a risk and harm-based lens that I could use as well. And to give you an example, if you look at a platform like Pinterest, which most people would consider a fairly benign social media platform, although the CEO told me it was really a visual search engine, it's about inspiration, curation. Users aren't really interacting. Only 4% of Australian users are young people, and they already had under 16 safety protections. So to put them in based on sole purpose as a social media platform isn't really recognizing that it's probably relatively low risk. And so when I had to apply the test against the likes of Snapchat, Roblox, and Discord, they were all on the line because there are exclusions for online gaming platforms and for messaging platforms like Roblox. And so, and this is why I said it up front, this is not the only tool in our tool set. We're the first country in the world to hold Roblox to account, and by the end of this month, they will age verify all of their users because they started out as a platform for children. Their demographic is 5 to 13. And then adults started joining. Some of them were parents, but some of them were predators. And Roblox doesn't really know who is who.
It sounds like from both approaches here, it's an ongoing, evolving process of when a platform is in or out. This has been some of the criticism that it's a bit like whack-a-mole. What do you say to that? Is that just inevitably how you have to approach this?
I mean, technology is always going to evolve and change, and companies are going to add new features and functionality. I mean, one of the things we really had to get our head around with Roblox is its sole purpose, online gaming. Would kids be using the chat functionality, or a new feature called Moments, which is very much like Stories, that was developed by Snap and now has been kind of copied by the likes of Instagram and Facebook. So you see a lot of mimicking of features and functionality. There is no straight line or definition. Another example would be OpenAI. The week after I met with them in September, they announced Sora, which is a hyper-realistic AI-driven social media app that can create videos of cameos of people, and not always with your consent.
So the Australian approach is you don't need to prove your age with digital ID. This is about the companies. The onus is on the companies, and if they have systemic breaches, they can face hefty fines. Is that the sort of approach Indonesia will take here, that the onus should be on
Yes.
the companies themselves? They would face fines if kids are on their platforms when they shouldn't be.
Yes, David. So we're not after the parents or the children, but we want the platform to be accountable.
Okay.
Right. And just so you know what we expect them to do in the first instance on December 10th, they have started, we asked them to kindly and compassionately communicate to the under 16s they've identified. Of course, they have very sophisticated systems. They've had age inference and AI tools for years. So, I mean, they largely know who is under 16 and who is under 13. They just haven't had
This is
approval
not going to be
before.
perfect. You've made this point. The
No.
minister's made this point. You're not expecting that all children will be off on day one or even month one.
No.
There are going to be ways around this for some kids.
Yeah, and we've corrected for that. So, for instance, we've asked them to take a layered or what we call a waterfall approach. So they can't rely solely on one set of technologies. They can't specifically rely on digital or government ID, and that cannot be the last form of resort. They can use third-party tools. I'm not mandating which tools they use, but we just did an age assurance technical trial of 50 different technologies and found that the vast majority of them are accurate, robust. There are some accuracy issues, but are privacy preserving, and they can use these at a high level of technical readiness.
Of course, these companies aren't thrilled about what you're doing here. I want to ask you about taking on the tech giants here. In many ways, you know, countries around the world have tried and failed when it comes to tackling the power of these giants. Fifi, to you first. Are you already facing pushback from the social media giants? And
Well, David, we hope that the social media giants have the same spirit to protect our children online. But before President Prabowo signed the government regulation, number 17, or we call it in Indonesia, it's PP Tunas. And this PP Tunas is, it makes Indonesia the second country in the world to have a foreseeable comprehension regulation to protect the child online. So a huge social media representative came to our ministry. I don't have to say the name of which one, and said that this, before it was enacted by the president, this will be a disaster. It would not work. So our response was, well, the disaster is happening already. Look at our children, look at where they are. But we will implement a child safety or child-friendly social media. I don't know whether that works, but by saying that, by stating that in front of our minister, they already said it's a disaster. So that kind of approach, I think, what we are facing, not only in Australia or in Indonesia as well. But we also have many social media companies that are supportive, and they open communication, and I think we see a positive future in that area, hopefully, David.
And Julie, your experience when it comes to the pressure from some of these companies, of course it predates this particular issue. You've upset them over demands to take down extremist content as well. But what's this issue been like in dealing with the companies?
Well, obviously we're dealing with a broader swath of companies all at once rather than just one company and one individual with 200 million followers and a very loud dog whistle. But actually, we've seen some pretty grubby behavior.
Like what?
I won't talk too much about it, but
Are you talking about personally, or?
oh yeah, personally, and going after one of my kids at one point and trying to place a story about when he was 9 during COVID having a YouTube account, which even News Corp thought was too grubby to put up there.
How do you cope with that?
I mean, you have to be resilient. You have to absolutely know that you're doing the right thing. And having sat at the table with you, I thought the minister, Wells, had a very powerful speech yesterday. But standing with those 4 parents who have experienced unimaginable grief, and look at how they're channeling that grief into advocacy and action so that they can prevent other parents.
That gives you strength.
It gives us strength. We know that we're doing the right thing. And we're actually trying to take a very nuanced approach to it. And you may know that I came out initially before the bill was deliberated and passed, raising concerns. I talked about how well Australia had done water safety, where we had put fences around pools, very much like we did banning schools, which are in a contained area. But that doesn't mean we don't teach our kids to swim and we don't supervise them in the water. And what I felt they were asking us to do was the equivalent of fencing the ocean, where instead we teach kids to swim between the flags, we don't throw them into the waves without swimming lessons, we put shark nets up.
This was seen as you being critical of an outright ban.
I thought it was a very blunt force approach, but I have actually come around to it because for the past 9 years, we've made some significant changes that have been, I guess, incremental rather than monumental. We're starting to achieve more momentum. But I think we've reached a tipping point where something more forceful needed to be done.
So your thinking changed on this over the years?
Well, it did, and when I think about it, there's a lot of debate about safety and privacy, and you're giving all this information away. Well, these are surveillance devices. We are commodified. Our data is the currency that fuels these companies today, and there are these powerful, harmful, deceptive design features that even adults are powerless to fight against, like autoplay and endless scroll and snap streaks. So what chance do our children have?
Just in terms of taking on, what are very politically, financially, socially powerful and influential companies, Fifi, does it help to have collective action amongst like-minded countries on this?
Absolutely. We work close with the Australian government. We have discussions so we can compare approaches, especially when it comes to, I remembered, I think it was the FAT, the person said that the most important thing is the public support. And that's why we are eagerly creating more discussion, consultations, but through the educators, the parents, and the community. I think that's important to get a public support rather than fighting alone.
Is there strong public support in Indonesia for this sort of step?
Well, we hope so, but it's still quite new for Indonesia, and we are working on it.
You're worried about a backlash from particularly young people who
absolutely
are very keen on being on these platforms.
Yes, because at the moment there are 221 million internet users in Indonesia. That's not the population. The population is 280. The internet users are 221, and 9% of it are young users, which is under 12, David. So can you imagine the risk is growing for our young generation, what they're facing when they have internet access, social media access.
I guess some of the criticism has been this is going to push kids into darker corners of the internet. So YouTube made this argument yesterday that in an unlogged on state, people will be able to see worse things on YouTube.
Which they have the power to change with the recommender systems. So rather than serving content that would be acceptable for a 35-year-old male, we actually have a restricted access system where they've actually been using age assurance here in Australia from 2021 to 2022. And our new codes will come in March, and they will need to make that logged out state acceptable for under 18s.
Would there also be young people arguing, Fifi, that this social media allows kids who are geographically or socially isolated, perhaps they have a disability, that they can be a part of society through these platforms that they otherwise couldn't?
They still can with parental supervision, with their educators together if they want to access information regarding the education.
So to be
They
clear,
still
under
can.
your model, they would still be able to be on some platforms with parental supervision,
Yes.
but not the high-risk platforms at all.
Yes, and the low-risk platform.
They could still be there with parental
Yes.
supervision. Okay. So what sort of platforms would they be? Are there any that you could point to that would still be okay for kids to use?
I can talk about it more with the experts, with you, David, but today, because the ministerial regulation is
Still
still
being
being
worked on.
developed, so it's a bit too early. Because then the platform, they have to assess themselves again together with the government. So that's why
So that's still work,
I
that's
can
work
come
still
back to
being
you
done.
later with that.
Julie, is this the nightmare that the social media companies feared, that once Australia did this, you would start to see a flow on? Perhaps not in the United States, but in Indonesia, Malaysia has moved, Denmark, New Zealand. Is this what they feared all along?
I've always referred to this as the first domino, which is why they pushed back. They did push back pretty vigorously. And one of the companies, instead of implementing the age assurance, were spending time lobbying the European Commission. Just this week, the European Parliament voted across the European Union to have under 16 restrictions, and I'll be addressing the European Commission tonight on how the approach that we're taking.
What sort of pushback are you getting from the Trump administration?
Nothing yet on the social media minimum age bill. The companies have obviously been lobbying the Trump administration. They've been lobbying the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, who's sent me a letter. And I'm sure the irony is not lost on any of us that he was writing with great zealousness about what a zealot I was about enforcing the Online Safety Act and having extraterritorial reach by sheer virtue of writing to me and asking me to appear before the committee was also using extraterritorial reach.
You are going to respond?
I've sent a letter.
Yeah, I've sent a letter.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to come back to something you touched on at the outset, and that is what's next. We've already had discussion here this morning about AI, and I know, Julie, that beyond the social media ban, you've also been looking and acting on Nudify apps, on AI chatbots as well. How big a concern are these new emerging problems for kids online, and how do they compare to the harms that we've talked about when it comes to social media?
Well, unfortunately, I missed Roman, so hopefully I'm not over-catastrophizing things, but what's concerning to me, and part of what you have to do as an anticipatory regulator is to try and see around corners and where tech trends are going before they hit you in the face. So in 2020, we started a future casting program where the first issue I looked at was deep fakes. And at this time, it required a lot of computing power and technological expertise to be able to make even a pretty crappy deep fake. And a lot of celebrities were in these because you needed so many different images and angles to make one that looked somewhat realistic. I couldn't get the mainstream media to pick it up at the time, but what I was able to do when they updated the Online Safety Act in 2021 is to say, when people are complaining about image-based abuse, child sexual abuse, or TVEC, please make sure that synthetic media or deepfakes are covered. So they are. We have a 98% success rate in getting deepfake down when they're reported to us, and we've seen a doubling in the past 18 months. But that is, applying or remediating harm after it's been done. So we've done a couple of things. We see this happening in schools every week, and it's a pretty similar scenario. Young teenage boy, things that might be a little bit of fun to harvest some images of their female classmates. They usually do it en masse, and they use relatively free downloadable apps or declothing sites to create very hyper-realistic sexualized videos. sometimes when it's malicious, they're trading them like they're footy cards, or they're posting them on porn sites, but mostly it's around the school community. But it's absolutely denigrating and humiliating and devastating for these young girls. But they're also generating synthetic child sexual abuse because these are under 18s. So schools were having very uneven responses, and what we did is we developed a deep-faked image-based response management tool for them, so they know how to collect evidence, they know when to go to the police, they know when to come to us, and really how to handle both the perpetrator but also the victim survivor. And we've just taken action against a nudifying app company, a holding company in the UK, that has 6 of the most popular declothing apps. And they actually market these as, give us the body type and the age of a schoolgirl and we'll nudify them in minutes. So these are, I don't want to name the apps because I don't want to stimulate the prurient interest, but there were 100,000 downloads of these sites in Australia per month, and they're now, access is now blocked. The final thing we've done is we took a man to court who was an Australian who was living in Manila and creating deep-faked image-based abuse of well-known sexual assault survivors as well as female politicians. And he thought he was out of reach and said, "Nana, Nana, come get me." And so we worked with Border Force. They put a pace alert on, and when he came in for the V8 supercars, we had him arrested, and he's now being fined $345,000 for creating deep fakes, which I think is an important deterrent.
Is this a problem you're seeing as well, the deep fakes?
Well, yes, but I think Ibu Julie has comprehensively explained the dangers of child exploitation. But I think we also have to remember that even if it's no harm, if it's not sexual exploitation, or if it's not scam, but our children are facing a huge challenge to be able to learn normally at school, to be able to concentrate, and to be able to just enjoy their childhood normally. So that's also a very huge problem. We want them to enjoy their childhood and to be able to learn well at school.
And to be friends with other humans rather than AI companions.
Which brings us to
Julie.
Which brings us to the AI chatbots. Julie, what's happening in that space with kids in particular and their use of AI chatbots, and what needs to be done about it?
Again, we heard from school nurses back in October of last year that 11 to 13-year-old students were spending up to 5 or 6 hours a day on AI companion and chatbots. And we'd heard of Nomi and Character AI. This was before there was the lawsuit against Character AI and OpenAI. 5 to 6 hours a day, but they felt like they were addicted and that they were in quasi-romantic relationships. And we now all know that the AI companies are using sycophancy and anthropomorphism and all this emotional manipulation that we see through social media algorithms to keep people addicted and to kind of reinforce, they're being marketed as an antidote to loneliness, yet they're isolating kids. And what we saw in New South Wales is one of them was inciting a girl to engage in explicit sexual acts. And of course, the cases in the US against OpenAI and Character AI are about incitement to suicide.
Can the companies control what these apps are doing?
Well, this is what concerns me. I mean, they've trained them to kind of reinforce views. And we saw with the Adam Rain case against OpenAI, he started using ChatGPT as a way of helping him with his homework, and then started confiding about his mental health issues. There was one point where he told ChatGPT that he wanted to take his life. He wanted to know how to use a noose, and how would I hide it from my parents? And it actually told him, don't tell your parents, hide it. Right. And then the cases against incitement. So you've heard Sam Altman say, we're not always sure what the outputs are going to be. Character AI, in fighting their case, said that the chatbot outputs should be protected by the First Amendment as a way of avoiding liability.
So if that's the case, if they can't control that sort of thing happening, should kids also be banned from chatbots.
And so that's what we are effectively doing with our standards and codes. So in March of 2026, any AI chatbot or companion will not be able to provide services to under 18s that include explicit violence, sexually explicit or pornographic material, suicidal ideation, self-harm, or disordered eating.
So unless they can guarantee none of that stuff is there from March, they can't have children under 16 using those platforms.
18, yeah.
18, okay. All right, is that a step that you think Indonesia would look at as well?
I think so, but I just want to share, Julie, David, that one of the most important factor is also to give alternative to children who are already on social media for years. So we're also working on that, on digital literacy education, but also to develop what would be the alternative? Is it just, okay, just read a book and watch TV or ride your bike? I don't think that's a simple solution. We just have to develop a comprehensive solution. But most of all, for us in Indonesia, we have to get the parents, the educators, the civil society to support and understand this regulation first, and to be able to give support and take care of our own children first.
Let's get some questions from the floor. Do we have anybody with a, put your hand up if you have a question. Good opportunity to ask one. I can't see, oh no, we do, up the back there. Yes, thank you.
Oh, it's fine. Thank you. My name is Rurike Mahashi from Nikkei, Japanese media. My question is for Commissioner. How will the e-commissioner or the government monitor attempts by children to bypass the social media ban, such as using VPNs or switching to alternative platforms? Will this involve tracking App Store downloads volumes for alternative services or requiring companies to report VPN usage?
Yes, I mean, we anticipated migratory movements a long time ago, including the use of VPNs. So written into our regulatory guidance, we put a lot of technical signals that, so the burden will be on the platforms themselves to prevent either location-based circumvention through VPNs, and so that will require them to re-age verify those that come within certain IP ranges or those that they can see are using an Australian-based app or even Telstra or Optus, a local service, but also age-based circumvention measures, whether it's trying to spoof the AI systems with high-end gaming graphics or generative AI or even wearing a mask or a mustache. A lot of the facial age estimation companies are testing for this now. So again, the burden is on the platforms. We've written to about 15 different sort of smaller platforms that we expect that kids will migrate to. A lot of them are working with us. A lot of them are 18 and over and don't want these challenges. And while we expect this will happen, I don't see this as a sign of failure. I think it will be very difficult because kids are going to so many different places that they won't achieve that same critical mass. We do have exclusions as well for messaging and gaming platforms. And one of the reasons is, back to your earlier point, David, that we know that kids that are First Nations kids or those who have a disability or identify as LGBTQI+, feel more themselves online than they do in the real world, and this is how they find their tribe, and we did not want to cut their digital lifelines. So we've been working with a lot of mental health organizations in terms of our messaging and places for them to go. Also worth noting is we're doing a comprehensive evaluation of the benefits, but also the unintended consequences. And we're doing this with 11 academics in Australia and overseas. We'll be looking at everything from, are kids sleeping more? Are they interacting more? Are they taking fewer antidepressants? Are they reading more books? Are they going outside doing sports? Are they going to darker areas of the web? And what is the outcome?
Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Jordan Bartlett, resilience consultant. We've talked about the services. We're probably talking about the apps as well and the integration there. Now it's the devices. So now I have the TV logged into my profile. I have my iPad. My children have some devices and so forth. how do we control the actual, or how do we implement it to the device so that the device knows who's using it? And this is where the parents are probably going to have to come in and have a lot of knowledge to be able to control that. Is there a device engagement with the software, Samsung, whether it's any one of these platforms?
That's a great question. And so the way our codes and standards work is they're developed by industry themselves, but the law sort of divides it into 8 different sectors of the technology sector. So there's one for OEMs and device manufacturers, app stores, search engines, ISPs, and then some broader categories. So with this harmful content codes and standards that we've just implemented, we asked them to take an ecosystem approach, and so that there will be more signals on the devices and from the app stores to the social media sites. So the social media sites have more signals about the age of the child through just age attributes themselves, not any other personal information, and even knowing, understanding the parental relationship to that anonymized person. So we are thinking about that. There's still a lot of evolution in the ecosystem that needs to happen.
Look, thank you. I'm conscious that we've gone. Should we squeeze in one more question? We've already gone a little bit over. Let's get one more question over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Stephen from Papua New Guinea, from the Department of ICT. So for Papua New Guinea, just about 4 months ago, our cabinet has also endorsed a social media policy, which has we've got a couple of things in it. One is the age restriction, and also we've provisioned for a classification framework, which will then guide how we classify each social media platforms, and then decide what level of restriction, age, we would impose on, and what kind of deterrence measures we would put as well against all of that. My question is on the assessing the age, right? So parallel to that, we are also deploying a sovereign digital ID for all of country, and we're suggesting to consulting with a couple of social media platforms whether they have they are comfortable with using a hard age verification system. I'm curious to know from the Commissioner, I mean, I've been only reading from the media how you what methods you're using to, to ascertain the age. What's your view on hard verification method to which we will use data anchors, government and private sector data anchors?
So just to be clear, PNG is going to go down that path of a digital ID requirement to use some of these platforms?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, we're taking a little bit of a more nuanced or layered approach because we don't want a single point of failure. We also have the history of the Australian ID card, and that was fairly roundly rejected. So what our legislation says is you can't specifically use just government or digital ID. It can be one factor, but there has to be other alternatives. And what's interesting is the demographics are very different. So those of us of our vintage, we're comfortable with 100 points of ID and a little bit more comfortable with sharing that sort of thing, whereas
That's
younger
changing,
kids...
isn't it?
Yeah, well, kids are used to taking selfies and facial age estimation and liveness tests. I was just saying the other day, I remember how weird it felt in 2019 when we just got used to using our thumbprints to open our iPhones, and then there was facial analysis, and we were opening up our phones with our faces, and then COVID happened, and they had to change the algorithms to focus on the eyes. But we almost take it for granted now. We open up our bank accounts, our computers. We're at that front area of age assurance and facial age estimation. Once people start doing it, and this is really the direction of travel. So now you have, every company from...
You're saying we could end up in that situation where we are using facial ID?
Facial age estimation, I mean, there's a digital ID strategy. I mean, look at it, no, there hasn't been a huge uproar in New South Wales about the digital license that came out under Victor Dominello. We see it as a convenience, and in some ways it's more secure than carrying around a plastic card that you could drop on the street.
So is that the eventual point you think we might get to, where we're just using facial age recognition to access TikTok, whatever platform it is?
So one of the technologies we tested was called Border Age. It's from France, and there's a lot of medical science behind it, but it's about hand gestures and the ligature, and it had a very high technical readiness level. Much more difficult to re-identify someone's hand. And so I think there will be different innovations that will be used if people decide that, you know, a lot of people feel very squeamish, and I don't blame them about biometrics of their face being taken. Of course, they have to be done in a privacy and security preserving way.
I'm going to have to investigate more about the hand recognition.
The border age.
First I've heard of that. It's fascinating how all of this is moving so fast. Thank you very much for the question, and fascinating to hear that PNG is also heading down this path now. Australia has absolutely started something.
Right.
There you go, solidarity on stage. Please thank Fifi and Julie for joining us this morning. Thank you.